Now, this stuff, the Leviathan race affiliation, when I talk about Leviathans, I talked about it a little bit yesterday. These were the hybrids that started out as a hybridization program, Emerald Covenant hybridization program to help these races back in the Atlantean period. It actually started 155,000 BC was when the hybridization program began. The Leviathan races that came out of the tribe, the hybrid tribe of Levi, were supposed to be a good thing, but they got taken over. So when I have this primary Leviathan race infiltration, these are the races that were infiltrated. If we see a race now that is descendant of that, they're the Illuminati versions in these race lines. Now, most of the race lines that are listed are angelic human 12 tribes. They were original human races, but they have certain portions of them that have been infiltrated by a Leviathan race to create an Illuminati line. And that Illuminati line is associated with different things. Each one of them have their own kind of certain areas of the globe and areas of the human populations that they infiltrated. So if we look at the Omicron Draconians, we have their primary Leviathan affiliations are Middle Eastern races, German races, Germany, Anglo-Saxons, Italian, Asian. They're called the Hala King Leviathan lines. Hala, Allah. Okay, this is where the distortions on what used to be a decent religion before they took it over, Islamic religion, the Muslim religion, was actually one of the translations, and it didn't look anything like it does now, was originally one of the translations of the Angelic Human 12 Tribes CDD plates. But they were infiltrated in the Atlantean period before the 9558B flood of Atlantis, and this is called the Hala Leviathan King lines. They were the group of hybrids that were, Illuminati hybrids that were taken into this particular agenda by the Omicron Draconian group, and Omicron soul started to incarnate into them, and they are the ones that distorted the teachings that now when you look at Islam, most of it was written by them at this point. You also have the same problem in Christianity, because most of Christianity was written by the Jehovah and Elohim at this point, because they did the same thing. What has happened here, since it started in Atlantis, and it got really bad after they orchestrated the 9558 BC fall of Atlantis to make it all disappear, literally every race line here of the 12 tribes has been compromised, where there has been an Illuminati Leviathan race sent in that were the incarnates of one of the fallen angelic lines that began to progressively interbreed and try to take over the race line. They would, in the old days, you didn't believe in the creed they were feeding you, you got killed. Simple as that. They would literally raid, and they would very often rape the women in order to make them pregnant. So they would be able to further their line and pick up more human coding as they went. We have lived a Holocaust since Atlantis. And the scary part is we have no memory that we even did that, because it's been such a good con job. So basically, you'll find this affiliation of the Omicron Draconian agendas all over in the Middle Eastern areas, some of them collectives in Germany. In the Anglo-Saxon lines, there are some. In the Italian, particularly Roman lines, like the Romans were there are actually two groups of Romans. One were a whole group of Leviathans that came in and took over on behalf of the Anunnaki, and the other were the ones that came in and took over on behalf of the Omicron Draconians. The Roman Catholic Church was founded by the Omicron Draconians. The Protestant churches were a rebellion against that by the Anunnaki. It breaks my heart, because these are the things, the only little grains of spiritual identification that we have had left to grasp, to keep a hold on our concept that we have a God someplace, that we're part of something larger. They have infiltrated the spiritual and the holy teachings. They've put their own names on them and their own agendas. That's why with the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, how they used to go kill everything that didn't agree with it, it was a political machine. They have all been. What they have done with Islam is the same thing. It is a political machine. And boy, do some of them like to play that to the hilt, like they're doing right now, like the Taliban. The Taliban are in trouble because they didn't want to join the United Resistance, because who's incarnated in Taliban bodies are the Omicron Draconians, most of them. And right now they're not very popular because they're not joining the United Resistance. So, United Resistance, Illuminati races, are going to be motivated to make sure they go away. You're going to find some house cleanings like this happening in other countries, like in Iraq. If Iran doesn't behave itself, they'll go there too. What you're watching is a fighting between races, even fighting between groups within, say, take Afghan, the Afghanis. They've been fighting with each other. If they don't fight with something else, they're fighting with each other. That's because there's several different groups of Leviathan races there and a bunch of humans thrown in among them. The humans usually get caught in the crossfire because it's usually the Leviathan races that end up in positions of political control. Why? Because they take it. All right? They fight, they kill things until they get themselves in power. And that's how they got in power in our country too. Our country was founded by Leviathan races, and that's unfortunate. But we were founded by the Freemason Illuminati movement. If you look back into records that they have on who George Washington was affiliated with, who Thomas Jefferson was affiliated with, our wonderful founding fathers. Now, there were good guys here. They didn't know half of the stuff they were affiliated with. Some of them did, but not to a heavy degree. But they knew they were Freemasons. And they knew that was a mystical society that withheld certain knowledge that had to do with Atlantis, that had to do with ancient Egypt. They withheld it from the general populations, and they used it in a lot of little psychic tricks that they picked up along the way to mess with people. They would have a thing where they'd come up and they'd say, "Hello, how are you?" And they'd just tap you on the shoulder. You got implanted. They knew how to do this consciously. All right, there are things in our history that we don't realize. America was a good country. It was intended to be a good country. It was going to be a battleground from the start because you had Maji Grail lines here that were holding down the fort since Atlantis. Some of the American Indian lines were Grail line, angelic humans, and indigos that were here to hold down the fort. That's why everybody tried to get rid of them. Who tried to get rid of them? The two competing lines that came over. You had your Anunnaki Freemason lines that came over from Europe, and you had your Draconian lines that came over from Europe, fighting with them. We can take it right into the Civil War. We had the Yankees and the rebels. At that point, you had the Yankee Anunnaki and the rebels down south with the Drac agenda. But these are people that get motivated by certain little groups that are in front of them. Most of them are humans. But they end up following Illuminati agendas because Illuminati get themselves positioned through birthing into certain family lines to keep themselves in power positions. So literally all of our political events have been connected to this undercurrent of what's going on in the Illuminati races. So this is some of the stuff that's affiliated with here. I could have gone further on these, but I didn't have time where we could take it right down into who does the Course in Miracles and who does this and who does that. Because literally everything out there on the bookshelves, particularly the channeled stuff, is attached to somebody, to one of these agendas. Some of them are decent ones. Some of them used to be good ones until they broke the Pleiadian-Sirian agreements in 1992. Then they decided that they were going to take the in that they had with humans and take it in a different direction. So at this point, you look around and you say, gosh, it's not just the old holy books that have been compromised, but the stuff that's coming through that we started to trust. Oh, the New Age movement, finally, it's going to get us out of the dogmas of the old stuff that we could feel the dogma was not right? Then there's this whole line of stuff coming out. UFO movement, New Age movement. That's the new infiltration angles coming from both sides. Total polar opposites meeting in the middle in mainstream. Now, the Adedicron reptilians, these guys aren't as bad as the Omicron Draconians. They're more reasonable. Draconians just want to dominate, and they will just move through and push through and stomp on anything that's in their way to do it whenever they can. But because they don't have that 11th strand advantage that their competitors, the Anunnaki, have, they tend to get themselves stepped on a lot because the Anunnaki are strategists. They think more into how to get things, where they'll wrangle things around and they'll set things up where they have races they don't want in their way, take care of themselves and get themselves out of their way. The Draconians are just more direct. They'll go in and invade and try to take you over, where the other ones that think, they win with their brain and they position things, tend to wipe out the Draconian races a lot. You see this kind of fighting in the Middle East all the time. It's usually between the different factions of the Adedicron and the Omicron and some of the Anunnaki groups, constantly trying to kill each other. Our whole history of war has been these guys trying to kill each other, dragging human tribes around with them. Right, we have reptilian Odedicron. They're different. They're an avian reptile strain. They're from Allentown, Orion, and some of the Omicron Draconians live on Allentown with them also. Some of them get along with each other. Some of them don't. So you'll see alliances between Omicron and Odedicron, and then you'll also see groups of Omicron and Odedicron that fight each other and try to kill each other. These guys, the associations down here are kind of interesting. You have in the Omicron Draconians, you have the Knights of Malta, which is an ancient group that came up, and it's still here. I think it's a family line. You have the KKK. Now there's other ones affiliated with KKK too. about the Ku Klux Klan guys. These guys are affiliated with those. Roman Catholic, Islamic religion, certain factions. Now, the majority of the Roman Catholic thing has been taken over by Omicron Draconian. They've been running for 100 years now, Draconian agenda, and the Anunnaki completely got kind of squeezed out of that whole deal. Before, they had certain holdings within it. The Knights Templar used to work with the Roman Catholic Church, but then they got into it. Knights Templar are Anunnaki. So at this point, you have Draconians running the Catholic Church. Now, the poor Pope doesn't know this. He doesn't have access to this information, and they're certainly not going to tell him. Why? Because he's a pope on a string. People are puppets here to these guys, and they follow ancient books, and they praise this God and that God, say a bunch of prayers in different languages that they think they know what they mean. They don't know. When you say tones, you're doing stuff to your DNA. You're activating DNA or implants. They've been having people do prayers, and you know how the Islamic people have been taught to worship a black cube that's sitting out in Mecca and to do all these sound tones repeatedly. What they're doing is reinforcing the reversed codes that their race has picked up from being infiltrated by the Draconians. The people don't realize this, and that's what's so sad about it, because Muslims are trying to be good people and to serve God. Christians are trying to be good people and to serve God. Buddhists are trying to be good people and to serve God. They have taken a core human desire and instinct, which is to know the self and to be a part of the universe and know your place within it. And they have abused us with it, and they have abused it. That's why it's important that I really like this group, because none of you have gone into that. Some people get really defensive. Like, I'm not going to listen to anything you have to say unless you tell me that God's name is Jehovah, or unless you tell me that Christ died on the cross. You're wrong if I'm not going to listen to anything you say. You're definitely wrong if you won't tell me Christ died on the cross. Fine. Have your Savior crucified if it makes you happy. But I mean, it takes courage to let go of what we've been programmed to believe and to use our brains finally and say, look at what's been done here. How dare anybody come in and take the most sacred aspects, our gene code, our bodies, our planet, and our sacred spiritual teachings, and do what they have done here. It's enough to say, okay, maybe I don't like this, and I'd rather believe in something light, love, and clueless that feels happier. But it creates a core spiritual anger that's not a rage that you'll hurt people with. It's a commitment and a conviction that there is a right and there is a wrong somewhere. And something about this is very wrong. So it gives you a strength where you say, I'm going to find progressively as I go through me, through my connection with Source, what that rightness is. And I am not going to let the wrong run my life anymore. And if that means I'm going to stand up to a bunch of people who are controlling this planet, you're not going to stand up and be a terrorist. You're not going to stand up and go kill people. That's not the way to work it. You stand up and do what humans were here to do, which was run frequency. Peacefully, lovingly, because that's what will fix it. But it gives you the commitment when you see how the amazing story. I mean, when we're watching Leave It to Beaver back in the 50s, boy, it wasn't Leave It to Beaver. We had X-Files going on right underneath it in our real life. So we're watching Leave It to Beaver, and like the Cleavers and everybody's getting along really nice and hunky-dory, perfect little family, nuclear family program. And meanwhile, we have Zeta's taken over the government. You have the government in the United States itself breaking the Constitution progressively, using the banking systems, messing with the banking laws, taking over the Treasury, making a private interest corporation out of what we call the Federal Reserve. This stuff is unconstitutional. Nobody bothered to notice. So is forcing you to pay taxes. Nobody bothered to notice that either. But are these things worth standing up and getting yourself in trouble for, fighting? No. You know why? Because you're taking on a Goliath that you can't take down that way, but it can step on you that way. Some things, it's like choose your battles carefully. If you want to make an issue out of not paying taxes, let's say, because you're going to be a patriot, there's a whole movement about doing that. The patriot people are right. The government has broken the Constitution of the United States. Unfortunately, it's the government that upholds the law of the United States. What court are you going to take them to? You know what I mean? And if you aggravate them enough and get enough people behind you to aggravate them more, what are they going to do to you? All of a sudden, you're going to find yourself with a very big tax bill. Or something. Yeah, really. Yeah, so it's like, why bother fighting the little battles? Because all you're going to do is get your energy drained and put yourself on a hit list. You don't have to fight aggressively in an anti-stance. What we need to do is realize we don't have to fight directly. What we need to do is run frequency. and that will accomplish the rest. It's kind of like standing and doing what we're here to do, not worrying about countering every move that the opposition is making. Get done what we need to do, and we will be successful here. And that's all it is. That's why if we approach it with love, when I look at, like, Mr. Bush and the other people that run the governments, I don't have anything against these people, even if they aren't human. Some of them are, some of them aren't. I don't really care. They're being played just as well. The people in MJ-12, which was Majestic 12, the first group of contactees in government places that was created in the 1930s, these people got involved with something over their head and ended up terrified. They realized that their treaties were totally nullified, and now they were the pawns of a bunch of ETs that literally terrified them. We need to not do the hatred thing, to point fingers, to blame. You want to blame somebody, point them this way, up toward these invisible things that have been flying around here for the last several 100,000 years that are messing with us, because that's where the blame is. And if you want to point blame past that, go back to gene codes that get messed up, and they weren't messed up on purpose. So you get blame is like a balloon that loses the air in it. There's no place to put it. It doesn't matter who did it, why they did it, whose fault it is. It helps you to understand, so you know how to position yourself, what to look out for. But you need to realize, too, you can love everything in the universe, even the things that are acting horribly. If you look at them, especially like people that are parents, you know how if you have a child, and that child, you love that child to bits, but it does something really awful, really bad, you learn. And sometimes you might have like an Indigo 3 child, and they have lots of challenges with their gene codes, and they may do things all the time to drive you absolutely crazy, you and the teachers and anybody else around you. But you learn as a parent to not hate the child, but not condone the behavior. So there's a system that's usually used with children that you devise certain ways of, oh no, this is a boundary, excuse me, you are going to learn this boundary. You don't go killing them because they were bad. You don't lock them in a closet and torture them because they were bad. You realize the limitations of how much can they understand and how much they can't, and you try to devise a way to handle them individually, where you can say, all right, these are the behaviors we're trying to help you develop, and this is where you are. You try to find, and it's a horribly long process working with even children on that level. This is really the approach. If you're not going to drive yourself crazy and get all sorts of hatred going inside yourself, what's really important is to look at the Illuminati guys and even the fallen angelic guys. They're very intelligent, and there used to be a saying, forgive them for they know not what they do. Oh, yes, they do. They know exactly what they're doing. They're doing it on purpose. But to do things like they do on purpose requires a sickness. It requires mental illness. And that's what they're dealing with. You can be brilliant and a genius and be psychotic at the same time. And that's what we're dealing with these guys. So it helps you if you can start out on that level right there, where you don't have to say, I'm going to hate these guys, I'm going to blame them, go get them. That's not the solution. The hate's going to be in you, and it's going to bring more of them and their negativity to you. If we can approach it like realizing we're healers on this planet. Humans were put here as healers, and these were a group of very sick beings. Now, right now, the very sick beings are like the psychos that took over the hospital. And somehow the hospital, or planet Earth, has to be brought back under control, or they're going to blow up the hospital and take it over and use it in their matrix. So you can't just say, oh, well, I'll let them just be and let them walk all over you and give you field implantation and con you every time they open their mouth, because this is the type of stuff you'll get from people who are possessed by them or people who are working with them. So it's a very fine balance.